When we talk about the way nations interact, it is tempting to believe that decisions are guided by goodwill, compassion, or friendship. But that's not how the world works. Human beings might occasionally be motivated by kindness, though even then it is often mixed with self-interest, but nations never are. Nations are entities of survival. They function like massive organisms, each with their own nervous system, each with their own immune response, each driven by the same primal demand, continue existing. When America looks at Pakistan and chooses to align itself, at least in certain circumstances, with Pakistan against India, it isn't doing so out of generosity. It's a calculation rooted in centuries of historical precedent and timeless laws of power. Just like gravity doesn't care about your feelings, geopolitics doesn't care about morality. It is a mechanism, a balance, a relentless weighing of interests, strengths, and vulnerabilities. The most fundamental principle here is that power always balances itself. Think of a seesaw, but instead of children playing, you have entire nations with weapons, economies, ideologies, and histories weighing down one side or the other. If one side rises too high, if one country becomes too dominant, the seesaw tips dangerously, and the other players will scramble to add their weight to the opposite side. It's not even always intentional. It's the way systems behave. When America looks at India, it sees a rising power with influence, with ambitions, with increasing military and economic strength. And when any power rises, the system compensates. Pakistan, by virtue of its geography and its history, becomes the natural counterweight. America doesn't have to love Pakistan, just as it doesn't have to hate India. It simply sees the balance and acts to maintain it, because instability in that balance threatens everyone, including itself. This principle isn't restricted to nations. It applies to you as an individual as well. When you let one part of your life dominate, maybe you dedicate yourself entirely to your career while neglecting your health or your family, the imbalance creates chaos. It will come back to punish you. If you rise too high in one area without stabilizing the others, the system compensates, and often brutally. Nations behave the same way. If India surges too far without limits, if it exerts unchecked dominance over the region, it risks destabilizing its neighbors. America understands this. A stable South Asia is preferable to one nation unchecked, because unchecked power generates resentment, conflict, and ultimately war. The balance is not optional, it is mandatory. You can ignore it, but you cannot escape it. When America offers support to Pakistan, it isn't rewarding virtue. It's acknowledging necessity. Pakistan's position between China, India, Afghanistan, and Iran gives it an unavoidable importance in global strategy. You don't get to ignore a country that sits at the crossroads of so much tension and opportunity. And so America, despite years of conflict, disagreements, and mistrust, still finds reasons to engage, to arm, to support Pakistan when necessary. It does so not because Pakistan has been a flawless ally, but because the balance demands it. Just as in life, you may not always like the people you must cooperate with, but survival requires you to. The deeper truth here is that morality in international relations is often secondary to survival, and survival is never negotiable. This is hard for people to accept, because we want to believe in ideals. We want to believe that alliances are forged out of loyalty, that friendships between nations are like friendships between people. But that is naive, and naivete is dangerous. It blinds you to reality. America doesn't think in terms of friendship. It thinks in terms of leverage. Who can it work with to prevent disaster? Who can it empower so the balance doesn't break? That is the calculation. And once you grasp that, the apparent contradictions of American foreign policy stop being confusing. They start making sense. America can oppose Pakistan in one decade and support it in another, because the underlying principle isn't loyalty. It's balance, always balance, and here's the deeper layer. This balance, seeking is not malicious, it isn't even necessarily cynical. It is the mechanism by which large systems avoid collapse. Without balance, the world tilts toward chaos. Imagine a world where no one counterbalances China, or where no one counterbalances Russia, or where no one counterbalances the United States itself. That world would not be peaceful. It would be violent, fragile, and unsustainable. So, when America chooses to lend support to Pakistan against India, it is not so much making a moral decision as it is participating in the ancient necessity of equilibrium. That necessity transcends opinion. It is woven into the structure of existence itself. Now, think about the psychological mirror of this principle. Every time you allow one emotion, one ideology, or one ambition to dominate you, you distort the balance of your inner life. You become tyrannized by your own impulses. A person consumed only by anger is a danger to themselves and others. A person consumed only by ambition destroys their family and health. Just as the world requires balance, so does your psyche. Power unchecked, within or without, invites destruction. And if you understand this, if you internalize it, then you stop demanding that nations or individuals act purely out of virtue. Instead, you demand they act with awareness of the balance. That awareness is far more stabilizing than shallow moral posturing. Let's also consider the cost of ignoring this law. If America ignored Pakistan, if it allowed India to dominate the region without counterbalance, what happens? Rivalries deepen, borders ignite. The small conflicts simmering below the surface erupt into flames. Then America finds itself pulled into chaos far worse than the controlled imbalance it tried to manage. In your life, the same thing happens. If you ignore one problem, if you refuse to face the truth about your addictions, your weaknesses, your failures, those problems grow, metastasize, and then they explode into crises that you cannot control. The price of ignoring balance is collapse, both for nations and for individuals. So, the principle is brutally simple. Power always balances itself, whether you want it to or not. America supports Pakistan because if it doesn't, the seesaw tips too far toward India, and the consequences are unpredictable. The global system resists unpredictability. It seeks equilibrium because only in equilibrium can progress occur without collapse. And if you want to grow as a human being, you must also seek equilibrium. You must understand that unchecked dominance of pride, of fear, of anger, of desire always ends in self-destruction. The world teaches you this truth every single day if you're willing to pay attention. When you consider the relationship between nations, you must first understand that identity is not a superficial label. It is the core narrative that a people tell themselves about who they are, where they come from, and what their purpose is in the world. Nations, like individuals, do not act randomly. They act according to the story they believe about themselves. Pakistan has a story, born out of division, forged in struggle, positioned at the meeting point of civilizations. That identity is not simply historical, it is psychological. It shapes how the nation views its enemies and allies, and how others view it in return. America sees this identity, interprets its strength and its fragility, and responds accordingly. That is why identity always precedes destiny. The way you define yourself dictates how the world engages with you. In the geopolitical arena, Pakistan occupies a symbolic and strategic role that cannot be ignored. It is not merely a piece of land bordered by India, China, Afghanistan, and Iran. It is an identity constructed out of resistance, religion, and resilience. That identity makes it a counterweight to India, not only militarily but ideologically. The West perceives India as a rising secular democratic giant, and Pakistan as its opposite, an Islamic republic with a different cultural and political vision. These identities clash, and that clash generates consequences. America, observing this, is not simply choosing sides in a vacuum. It is recognizing that Pakistan's self-definition grants it influence beyond its size. The identity makes it powerful, and thus, America must contend with it, often by offering support. Now, this principle extends into your personal life. If you define yourself as a victim, then your destiny is already written in the language of resentment and weakness. If you define yourself as capable, as someone who carries responsibility, then your destiny unfolds in the direction of strength and growth. Nations mirror this exact process. Pakistan has long defined itself as the protector of its faith, the defender of its sovereignty against larger forces. That identity summons respect and often fear. America calculates based on that narrative. It sees a country that will not dissolve quietly into the shadow of India, and because identity demands recognition, America acknowledges Pakistan with its support. The same is true of you. If you stand for something, others cannot ignore you, even if they wish to. The importance of identity in international politics is often underestimated by those who rely only on material analysis. They say, it's about GDP, about armies, about nuclear weapons. And, of course, those things matter. But why do nations pursue such things in the first place? Because of who they believe themselves to be. Identity precedes material power. A nation that does not believe in its own story will not build the tools of influence. Pakistan's story fuels its endurance, its refusal to submit, its determination to play a role in global affairs despite economic struggles. America, recognizing this, sees not just a struggling economy, but a nation possessed by an unyielding identity. That identity, unshakable and immovable, makes Pakistan an unavoidable partner in America's balancing act against India. Think of identity as both a shield and a sword. It protects you against domination, and it also projects your will outward into the world. Pakistan wields its identity to demand recognition, to resist being absorbed into India's narrative of dominance. And America, being a master of narratives itself, understands the power of stories. It knows that the Pakistani story resonates across the Muslim world, across the region, across ideological battlefields. So, even when America criticizes Pakistan, even when tensions rise, the underlying truth is this: the identity cannot be erased. That is why support flows back again and again in cycles. You cannot destroy what a people have decided they are. You can only navigate it, negotiate with it, and occasionally empower it for your own purposes. If you fail to construct your own identity consciously, then someone else will construct it for you. This is as true for nations as it is for individuals. A person who never decides who they are becomes defined by circumstance, by exploitation, by other people's agendas. A nation that refuses to articulate its role in history becomes a pawn for stronger forces. Pakistan's survival and continued influence are linked directly to its refusal to let India or the West define it. That self-definition, as independent, as Islamic, as resistant, compels America to acknowledge it as more than just territory on a map. The destiny follows the identity. Without it, Pakistan would fade. With it, Pakistan commands support even from reluctant partners. Consider how this mirrors your psychological life. If you tell yourself that you are weak, incompetent, and doomed, then every action you take bends toward proving that story true. If you tell yourself that you are capable of carrying burdens, of standing upright, then your actions align with strength. The world responds to you in accordance with the identity you project. Nations are no different. America supports Pakistan in part because Pakistan projects itself as indispensable. Whether through military leverage, ideological positioning, or geographical advantage, Pakistan's identity announces, "We matter." And in response, America must act as though Pakistan matters. That interplay between narrative and reality is the foundation of destiny. Identity is not static, it evolves. But it must be grounded in something solid, or else it becomes chaos. Pakistan's identity is rooted in its religion, its struggle for independence, and its survival against overwhelming odds. This foundation provides consistency, and America calculates based on that consistency. You must do the same in your life. If your identity shifts with the winds of every passing opinion, no one will take you seriously. But if it rests on principles, discipline, responsibility, truth, then your destiny unfolds in a stable direction. Pakistan's destiny, for better or worse, is tied to its refusal to abandon its foundational identity, and that insistence is what compels American engagement, even when relations sour. Finally, understand that identity comes with responsibility. To declare who you are is to accept the burdens that come with it. Pakistan's identity forces it to live under constant pressure, constant conflict, constant demand for resilience. But that same identity guarantees that it will never be irrelevant. America cannot ignore a nation that insists on being recognized. And you cannot expect the world to recognize you if you do not insist through action on who you are. Identity is not given, it is earned, it is lived, and it is reinforced through struggle. The story you choose defines the destiny you live. America sees Pakistan's chosen story, and whether it approves or not, it must respond. That is the inescapable power of identity. International politics is, at its root, an attempt to transform chaos into order. Chaos is the natural state of things, competing tribes, unpredictable conflicts, and the constant threat of collapse. Every nation struggles with this. Order requires vigilance, discipline, and sacrifice, while chaos always lurks, waiting to rush back in when vigilance falters. America, as a global superpower, does not want chaos in South Asia. Why? Because chaos spreads. It destabilizes neighbors, it disrupts trade, it provokes extremism, and it creates vacuums that other, perhaps more dangerous forces will fill. Supporting Pakistan against India is not necessarily about choosing a preferred friend. It is about limiting the chaos that could spiral if one power becomes too dominant, or if tensions erupt uncontrollably. When we speak about chaos and order, it's easy to think of them as abstract concepts, but they are not. They are forces that operate in every system, from your personal psyche to global geopolitics. Pakistan and India are two poles locked in conflict, and without mediation or balancing forces, that conflict could spill into the kind of chaos no one can control. America looks at that situation and calculates, how do we maintain a measure of order here? Supporting Pakistan, even inconsistently, serves as a tool of containment. It prevents India's dominance from sparking a reactionary escalation, and it reins in Pakistan from collapsing under pressure. In the end, both sides are restrained, and order, at least temporarily, emerges from the chaos. Think of chaos as a fire. Left unchecked, it consumes everything in its path, but managed carefully, it can provide warmth, energy, and transformation. Nations use chaos strategically when they need to, but they also fear it because it is unpredictable. America doesn't want to see South Asia descend into uncontrolled fire, because such a collapse would not stop at borders. Refugees, terrorism, economic disruption, and nuclear instability would spread beyond the region. And so America supports Pakistan as a method of firebreak, of control, of channeling energy into boundaries rather than explosions. It is not benevolence. It is the recognition that order must be maintained at almost any cost, because chaos is infinitely more destructive when it spirals beyond control. The same principle applies within your life. Chaos is necessary for growth. You cannot create order without first confronting the unknown. But if you let chaos overrun you, if you ignore discipline, if you surrender to impulse, then your life burns out of control. To master yourself, you must strike a balance. Enough chaos to generate creativity, enough order to provide stability. That balance is fragile, always in flux, always under threat. Nations do the same. America cannot erase the chaos between Pakistan and India, but it can try to stabilize it, to give it structure. Supporting Pakistan is part of that structuring process, a way of ensuring that chaos doesn't destroy the system entirely, but instead remains constrained within manageable boundaries. Order is not the same as peace. That's a mistake many people make. Order simply means that the chaos has been organized, that it has been shaped into something tolerable, predictable, and structured. Peace is an ideal, but order is a necessity. America understands that it cannot produce perfect harmony in South Asia. It cannot erase centuries of tension between India and Pakistan. But it can strive for order, and order often comes through alliances that appear contradictory or unfair. Supporting Pakistan serves as a stabilizing act, even if it frustrates India, because the alternative is disorder, and disorder threatens everyone involved. In the hierarchy of values, order comes first, because without it, nothing else can exist. If you reflect honestly, you will see this in your personal relationships as well. You will never achieve perfect peace with everyone you encounter, but you can establish order, boundaries, agreements, systems of trust that prevent chaos from tearing apart the relationship. Without order, small disputes spiral into destructive conflicts. That's exactly what America fears between India and Pakistan. Without support, without mediation, without pressure, the conflict could expand into uncontrollable war. By choosing to support Pakistan at certain times, America is acting as a force that seeks to keep the disorder within limits, to prevent small fires from turning into infernos. It's a pragmatic move, not a moral one, and that distinction matters. Chaos is seductive because it promises freedom, but it conceals destruction. Order is demanding because it requires discipline, but it creates the possibility of growth. Nations that lean too far into chaos collapse into fragmentation. Nations that lean too far into rigid order collapse into tyranny. The balance is delicate. America's foreign policy reflects that balance. Too much support for India might create an unchecked dominance that provokes chaos. Too little support for Pakistan might create weakness that leads to collapse. Both extremes invite disaster, so America moves carefully, sometimes contradictorily, to maintain just enough order for the system to hold together. This is not hypocrisy, it is survival. At the core of this is the recognition that systems do not self-regulate forever. They require intervention, guidance, and sometimes manipulation to maintain their structure. Just as you must constantly work to maintain order in your life, cleaning your room, paying your bills, disciplining your emotions, nations must constantly work to maintain geopolitical order. If they do not, chaos rushes back in. America's engagement with Pakistan is one of those acts of maintenance. It is not optional. It is as necessary as tending to the cracks in a foundation. Ignore them, and the house collapses. Address them, and the house holds even if imperfectly. That is the logic of order against chaos. When you observe the pattern closely, you begin to understand why America sometimes appears inconsistent or contradictory in its choices. It is not inconsistency, it is responsiveness to chaos. Systems change and order must adapt. Supporting Pakistan against India is part of this adaptive process, a way of ensuring that the broader system does not unravel. You may not like the decision, it may appear unfair, but it is a reflection of an unavoidable truth. Chaos will always encroach, and only deliberate action can hold it at bay. Nations, like individuals, cannot escape this battle. They must confront it daily or risk being consumed entirely. Support always follows responsibility, not the other way around. It is a law embedded in the structure of human interaction. Nations, like individuals, gain allies not because they beg for them or demand them, but because they demonstrate competence, reliability, and resilience. When Pakistan takes on responsibility in its region, politically, militarily, strategically, it signals to the world that it is capable of carrying burdens. And the world, noticing that, responds with support. America's engagement with Pakistan follows this principle. It is not charity. It is not sentimentality. It is recognition that a nation willing to shoulder responsibility earns a seat at the table, and a seat at the table brings influence, resources, and strength. You see this principle at work in every human life. A person who refuses responsibility becomes weak, resentful, and irrelevant. No one relies on them, no one respects them, and no one supports them, because why should they? What use is a person who collapses at the first sign of burden? But when someone takes responsibility, when they work diligently, when they confront problems, when they bear suffering voluntarily, others recognize their strength. They become indispensable. In the same way, when Pakistan demonstrates responsibility for regional stability, or when it takes decisive action in the fight against extremism, America recognizes that strength. It offers support not out of kindness, but because strength rooted in responsibility is valuable in maintaining the global order. This principle also explains why weakness attracts exploitation. If you refuse responsibility, you don't just fail to earn support, you invite domination. A nation unwilling to confront its problems is treated like a liability. Others step in to manipulate, to control, to exploit. In personal life, if you avoid responsibility, someone else will make decisions for you, and you won't like the outcome. Nations behave in the same way. Pakistan cannot afford to abandon its responsibilities, because doing so would invite interference from stronger powers who would carve it up for their own interests. America sees this. When Pakistan steps up to its responsibilities, it becomes a partner. When it shirks them, it becomes a pawn. The choice between strength and weakness begins and ends with responsibility. Consider the historical struggles of Pakistan. Survival in the shadow of a larger neighbor, constant conflict, and political instability have forced the country to make difficult choices. But survival itself is a form of responsibility. A nation that continues to endure despite the odds proves its strength. America notices this. The very act of surviving, of refusing to dissolve, of continuing to assert itself, is responsibility in action. And that is why America cannot ignore Pakistan. Responsibility transforms fragility into strength, and strength commands support. You see the same thing in your life. When you carry the weight of responsibility without collapsing, people respect you. They may even oppose you, but they cannot dismiss you. Responsibility is not comfortable. It is heavy, painful, and demanding. But that is precisely why it produces strength. If responsibility were easy, it would mean nothing. The burden is what shapes you. For Pakistan, responsibility means managing internal divisions, economic challenges, and external threats all at once. Each of these is a burden, but also an opportunity to prove strength. America supports Pakistan because it recognizes that a nation willing to endure its burdens is more reliable than a nation that hides from them. The same is true for you. Every time you face your difficulties head on, you demonstrate to the world that you are not weak, that you are someone who can be counted on. That is how respect and support are earned. Support is always conditional on demonstrated reliability. America does not support Pakistan because it feels sorry for it. America supports Pakistan when Pakistan shows that it is carrying responsibilities that matter to the regional and global order. This means fighting terrorism, protecting borders, cooperating in strategic matters, and resisting collapse. Each of these responsibilities is costly, but they are necessary. Responsibility creates credibility, and credibility brings influence. Without credibility, no one listens, no one cares, and no one helps. The world is not a parent who pampers you out of love. The world responds to strength, and strength is built by responsibility. If you want allies, you must first become someone worth allying with. Think of responsibility as the price of significance. If you want to matter, you must pay that price. Pakistan matters because it carries the weight of its geography, its history, and its role in the Islamic world. That weight forces it to remain significant, even when its economy stumbles or its politics falter. America supports Pakistan because it knows that significance cannot be ignored. In your own life, if you want to matter to others, you must shoulder your share of burdens. You must take responsibility for your family, for your work, for your community. Only then will others recognize you as someone of value. Significance is not granted. It is earned through responsibility, and it comes with strength that cannot be faked. There is also a paradox here. Responsibility feels like limitation, but in truth, it is the path to freedom. A nation that refuses responsibility becomes a slave to chaos, constantly at the mercy of forces beyond its control. A person who avoids responsibility becomes a slave to impulse, trapped by addictions, fears, and failures. But a nation or a person that embraces responsibility gains control, because responsibility orders chaos. Pakistan, by taking responsibility, gains the freedom to influence its future. America sees that and responds accordingly. You gain the same freedom in your life when you stop blaming others and start carrying your burdens. That freedom attracts respect, and respect becomes a kind of power in itself. Ultimately, the world doesn't reward those who demand pity. It rewards those who accept responsibility and prove their strength through action. Pakistan's strength lies not in perfection, but in its willingness to keep carrying its burdens despite constant challenges. That endurance earns America's attention and often its support. In your life, it is the same. No one truly supports the person who refuses to grow, who refuses to try, who refuses to carry weight. But everyone notices the person who stands up straight under the heaviest load. Responsibility transforms weakness into resilience, chaos into order, insignificance into influence. It is the root of strength, and strength is what commands support, whether in personal life or in the global order.